Thank you, Eric, so much for that introduction, and really for pushing this to happen. I said as we were planning it, Wednesday night, middle of the week, we didn't even know it was going to be a Knicks game on at the time. It's a tough sell, at least in my shul, my community. I work for the Jewish Center for Atlantic Beach, but really testament to this community. I'm really blown away, really amazing. Thank you, first of all, everyone, for coming out here. I hope you came mostly for the sushi, but I do hope to make this a very worthwhile, meaningful, educational, and practical presentation. I would say that a lot of what I'm going to speak about tonight is from things I would do in individual therapy in my private practice that would take several sessions, at least 2, 3, or 4 sessions. So you're getting good bang for your buck, right? If you multiply the session rate times how many people are here, it's very good value. So it is like free therapy, as I'll call it, but also things that will help you grow, be a better person. It can help other people in your life. So we'll start off with some Torah, and then we'll weave in the psychology. Just by way of background, also, I'm a rabbi. I have smicha from Yeshiva University. I work as the assistant rabbi and the program director for the Jewish Center for Atlantic Beach. So I'm also taking notes. The senior rabbi asked me to see how many people show up to their Wednesday night classes. So we have to do some work on our PR. And I'm a clinical psychologist. I have a specialty in treating children, adolescents, and young adults with anxiety and behavioral disorders. And I work with many from people, Jewish people in the greater 5 towns. So I often get referrals for people who are struggling either with some type of spiritual problem or dilemma, or really they feel close or comfortable not just working with a Jewish therapist, but with a rabbi who understands halakha, Jewish life and culture, as well as psychology. That led me on a path and a journey several years ago, right before COVID, December 2019. It was 3 months before the COVID pandemic, where I was zocheh to co-author this book, The Handbook of Torah Mental Health. It was a collection of notes that I was keeping in a Google Doc from undergraduate through smicha, through clinical psychology program, where I just kept a running page of ideas that related to Torah and psychology, and that became really the backbone for this book. So it's a collection of over 50 Torah sources in Tanakh, Chazal, Rishonim, Achronim, and connected to psychology, divided up by chapters of anxiety, depression. So I'm gifting this copy to the Beit Midrash program here for people to share. Hopefully you have a good system of taking out books and it doesn't go missing. But this talk I'm giving tonight is a expansion on one of the entries in this book. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. So everyone should hopefully have one of these pages. This was originally a slideshow presentation, but we weren't sure exactly how to set up a slide projector. So it's basically my notes, but I'll be following this along, and you can follow along with me. We'll go over all the information together. Okay, so we started with part 1, what I call a bipolar or schizophrenic Seder. Okay, so what I wanted to do with you is kind of some type of interactive, this is educational type of technique. I gave you some of the answers here, but if you look at the Seder, the Haggadah, hopefully it's still pretty fresh. It was, I'm not going to say exactly how many days ago it was, because then I can't count Sfiras HaOmer later, but not too long ago. There is a dialectic, right, a contradiction between these two themes of slavery and freedom. I'm just curious, anyone here with a mental health background? Just it's always helpful to know we have any. Okay, all right, okay, good. So I'm always going to have to be careful with the terms that I use and to make sure I don't say anything that's not universally agreed upon. Okay, so we have some minhagim, some practices that represent slavery. So I listed a few. You can think of some others. So eating maror, right, bitter herbs. Salt water is the tears, charoset, the bricks, the broken matzah, like poor people, lechem oni, right? So that's all the slavery category. And then we also have things that represent cherus, freedom, leaning to the left, drinking 4 cups of wine, dipping, singing Hallel, and matzah also is considered, a symbolism of our freedom or kingship. And sometimes we do these things simultaneously, right? We dip the karpas into the salt water. So dipping is b'nei chorin, is freedom, and salt water is slavery, right? The matzah itself could be both. Even the Manishtana. The Manishtana has 4 questions. The first 2 are about slavery-oriented things, and the second two are about freedom-oriented things. We say, Hashata Avdi, this year we are slaves, right? So we're kind of in this contradiction, in this tension of slavery and freedom, right? Matzah itself is the perfect example of that. Even any others people can think of, I'll give you a charoset, might have a little bit of both, right? Charoset is the bricks, but maybe also, I don't know, the apple tree, right? So if you really look into the Seder, you'll see that there are so many themes back and forth simultaneously. So what is it? What is the answer? Are we free or are we slaves, right? We're trying to be free. We're trying to be kings and royalty, but we're still doing a lot of things that maybe are reminiscent of slavery. So what I want to argue with you tonight is that really we are not free. I know it sounds blasphemous, but we are still slaves, right? We want to be free. We are inspired to be free. We hope to be, but you can't go from 210 years of slavery and then overnight wake up and say, now I'm a free man, right? There's something called a slave mentality, right? There's a culture, there's a mindset of slavery that doesn't go away overnight. And similarly, if we could make this a metaphor for mental health, right? Many people that I speak to, and I'm sure many people could relate to the idea of being a slave to something. We're a slave to our phone. We're a slave, we're addicted to bad habits, to poor lifestyles, to poor choices, and we feel like we want to break free. Right? People have these resolutions, they want to be better, they want to grow, they want to improve on themselves, and that is great and that's wonderful, but that is just a small part of what comes next. Right? That is the moment of inspiration, that is the eureka of, you hear a good shiur, right? And you feel on fire, you're like, I'm going to be so much better about this, I'm going to stop speaking Lashon Hara, I'm going to learn more Torah, I'm going to be better about my Shabbos observance, I can do all these things, right? That is Pesach, right? Leil Seder, the first night of Pesach, is a moment, a feeling. We want to be free. We're trying to be free, but we're still slaves. We're not there yet. You might argue that there's a evolution across the Seder, starting from slavery, maybe by the end of the Seder, we're free, but it's not a Pesach shiur. In the second source, we see that there is actually a holiday that is the holiday of freedom, right? It's actually Shavuos. Learning from Pirkei Avos, if you're doing Pirkei Avos, there's a custom to do a chapter a week from Pesach to Shavuos. So the 6th chapter says, She'ein lecha ben chorin ela mi she'osek b'talmud Torah. Right? Who is a free person? Who is a ben chorin? Someone who is osek in Torah, who's studying Torah. So that's Shavuos. We're really free on Shavuos. Pesach is the beginning of the journey, and we climb up the mountain. Pesach, again, is the moment of inspiration where we want to do something, but it's just a desire, it's just a feeling, and it's not going to last. If I could teach one thing or one message that I want to drive home, and I do this over and over again with my clients, is that willpower is fool's gold. I know that also sounds very controversial. So many people want to will themselves to be good. They just want to, white knuckle it, grind it, and they just want to, if they want to train for a marathon, they just want to wake up and they want to run 26 miles the next day. Or if they want to quit smoking or drinking or any other bad destructive addiction or habit, they just want to will themselves. They just want to be so motivated, so on fire, so passionate, they could just break free. Right? They don't want to be slaves, but it's not really how it works. Some people, a few, are able to be masliach that way. They're able to just quit cold turkey or just, wake up. My Saba, may he rest in peace, he smoked for many years, and one day he had a doctor's appointment, and his doctor said, you gotta stop smoking, you're gonna die, you have all these problems. And I don't know, my Saba was a strong Bukharian Israeli man, he just stopped. The next day, he just never smoked again. I don't know how he did it. He's a discontinued model. They don't make people like that anymore, right? For many people, it doesn't go that way. Many people cannot just desire something, feel something, and then turn it into action on a sustainable basis, long term. Yes, you could last a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month, maybe a few months, but to have long-lasting, meaningful change, which is what tonight is all about, there's a whole strategy of work and effort and daily consistency that we're going to talk about. So therefore, Pesach, let me just grab my drink, is not really the night of freedom. But you want to remember that moment. You always want to remember when you were inspired. That's why in source 3 we have Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim. Right? We're always mentioning, we're always referring to, do you remember that time? Do you remember that night where you felt on fire, you felt alive, you felt so passionate? Remember when you were in yeshiva in Israel? Remember the day of your wedding? Do you remember when your first child was born? Do you remember how you felt incredible and so inspired? Don't forget that moment. It's going to go away. It's fleeting. But Zecher L'Tziyam Mitzrayim, everything is Zecher. Remember that time, but do the real work. So again, just to build up on the Torah part, right? The Seder is a model for growth, but the real work comes on the second night of Pesach, right? The second night of Pesach, the second Seder in the Chutz La'aretz, we do something else. We add something that we don't have in the first Seder. I think it might be the only thing we add, except for like maybe one song at the end of Nirtzah. The only real change is Srias Omer. Right, at the end of the second Seder, if you remember, right, depending on how late your Seder goes, we start counting the Omer, and that is the real work, right? What the Srias Omer model, which is what tonight is all about, is where real change happens. We're going to talk about the ingredients, the recipe for growth, and in my work as a psychologist, people come in, and one of the first things we talk about in the first session is, what are your goals? You know, what do you want out of this? What are you here for? Right? It's very important for them to be able to answer that question. I work with a lot of children and teens, so very often the question is, I don't know, my mom told me I have to come here, or I don't really think I need to be here, or I have to be better, or stop fighting, or something like that. But it's very important for people to identify and clarify what their goals are. What are you working on? What does success look like? How do we define it? How do we know if you got better? What do you want to be? Do you want to be a Forbes 500? What is success for you? Especially when it comes to mental health disorders, we're not going to talk about specific disorders like anxiety, depression, OCD, etc. Although I'll weave them in, but it is very important to know to have managed expectations. That's one of the first things I do as a therapist is I try and be very clear what the expectations are. I tell people you can't cure anxiety, right? If you're an anxious person, if you have an anxiety disorder, you will always have anxiety. You will never be a totally chill, calm person, right? You're always going to have anxiety. Hopefully it'll be manageable, it'll be controllable, it will be helpful and not hurtful, but you're always going to be battling it. You're always going to be managing. That is the expectation, right? You want to go from let's say a 9 or a 10 out of 10 on the anxiety scale. You just want to turn the flame down a little bit, an 8, a 7, a 6, keep it manageable. It reminds me, I worked in my postdoctoral fellowship at the Center for Anxiety. It's where I met David Roachman, the co-author of this book. And we worked with a lot of people, the religious community in Flatbush and beyond. And there's one Jewish mother, typical Jewish mom, very busy. She brought her young child in with anxiety to her first session. And she said, I got 3 kids in the car. This is my son, Abi. Call me when he's cured. Right? And she said, I have to go do some errands. So I said, hold on, I'll come back. First of all, I kind of need you here for a little bit just to fill me in about what's going on. And also, I'm not going to cure his anxiety. She goes, what do you mean? That's what I'm saying. I said, no, you can't cure anxiety, right? It's part of it. And in another talk, I talk about why that's actually a good thing and it's helpful. And people with anxiety are very conscientious and very detail oriented, and hopefully it'll be a strength for you. But the expectation is managing it, coping with it. So again, this is all talking about what is your goal? What is the top of the mountain? What is your shavuos? What are you working towards? There's a reason why the gyms are basically full in January and empty in February, right? Because of this idea. Like people, they wake up New Year's Day and they say, I got to get fit, I got to get healthy, I got to lose weight. And I think this might be a man thing. I'm guilty of this myself. When you get into a new hobby, any cyclists here? We can talk about the cycling team. Yeah. Okay.
No, just
a question. Yeah.
A question when you're done with your thought.
Okay, hold that thought. Fine. I was just gonna say, since we're talking about the cycling team, okay, and since there's no, when you see them, they have the shoes, right, and they have the gear and everything like that. So a lot of people, they buy all that stuff first, right? They just go shopping and they have a new hobby. They buy all the power tools or they buy all this stuff that they're into. It doesn't always last. But how to have sustainable change over time is actually very boring. It's very, if I could use the word, not sexy. It's very not Instagram worthy, I would say. But that's where the real work is. Yeah, Gary.
I guess this might be too broad for the scope of this conversation, but when you think of a physical illness, right? You can cure that. So why is it that the expectation is that you can cure a mental illness, that you're supposed to just manage it? Okay,
it's a great question. Right? It was many times I do try to compare mental illness to physical illness. It's usually a helpful analogy for breaking the stigma when someone comes to therapy. I remember also in that place in Brooklyn, there was one Hasidic man who came from Borough Park, and he was so afraid of being seen in public walking to the front of the building. He had asked if he could sneak in through the back door. He didn't want anyone to see him go into a therapy building. So Sometimes use that analogy of like, you go to the dentist, you go to a physical therapist, that's not embarrassing or awkward. So, why should this be any different? So it's a good question. Beyond the scope of this talk, I guess, a regel achas, I would say that it is kind of a personality trait. I mean, there are mental health disorders that are, I guess, brief, like psychotic episodes where someone could be cured. Not many, but most of them, ADHD, OCD, anxiety, clinical depression, maybe even eating disorders and addictions are something that people always have to live with. It could be cured in that it's in like remission, I guess, if you compare this to cancer. But like you always have to watch it, look out for it for, maybe it could come back. You could have a relapse or something like that. So hopefully that better answers your question. Okay, so let's get into to the work. So the first quote is at number 5, a goal without a plan is just a wish, right? So many people have goals. They want to work out, they want to train, they want to write a book, they want to learn more, they want to be a better husband, better wife, better son, better daughter. But it's just a goal. It's just a wish without a plan, right? If they don't actually put it into action, if they don't actually have a method to use, if anyone here works for a hospital, like the objectives, the method of how you're going to accomplish that plan, it's just a wish, it's just a dream. Another quote I like to say to my clients is, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, right? Same idea. If you don't have a goal in mind, if you don't begin with the end in mind, for any teachers, any educators in the room, right? Okay, so is that a phrase, right? You go to the end of the year and you ask yourself, what do I want my students to know by the end of this year? And then you work backwards and make sure that you cover that, right? Begin with the end in mind, which is another quote here. Or if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, which means some people really go through life. I have a lot of clients, especially recently, what we call like failure to launch. A lot of young men, guys in their 20s, college ages, who are living at home, unemployed, not dating. I get a lot of calls like this. Just struggling in life, not motivated, and not launching like a young bird launching from the nest. They are stuck. As a child, the parents feel very worried. What's going to be with them? Am I going to have to take care of him for the rest of his life? And how can I get him to just be on his own, be independent? So that's a very, very common, unfortunately, very common, I would say, epidemic going on right now. So many young men living at home, living in their basement, just sleeping all day. What's going on is part of a bigger question. But I'll meet with them and I'll ask them, like, what do you want? What does success look like? They feel bad about themselves. They have low self-esteem. They feel like a failure. Their friends are getting married. Their friends are working and moving on with their life. And they feel stuck. And part of the work is to help them to actually have a vision, have a blueprint. They can't even imagine it. They can't even describe sometimes almost like a 5-year plan. I'd say if this goes really well and you get out of this rut and you start building your life, what do you want? Like, what is it? Describe the white picket fence, the backyard, the little kids playing baseball in the yard. Like, tell me what your dream is. And if they can't do that, it's very hard to even get started because I don't even know what I'm working towards. Like, I don't even know what they want. So how am I supposed to help them? So that's very important in the beginning of therapy or any really self-growth mission, is to define the goal, define the outcome, define success, and then to measure it. That's the next step, right? That which gets measured gets managed. These are like these nice little, I guess, Instagram-worthy quotes we like to have in the business. Very, very important. This is really the bread and butter of tonight's presentation. Measuring things, meaning recording data, recording progress, monitoring things, has been statistically proven to increase the likelihood of success, right? If you have a measure of recording, like, if you're trying to lose weight, so you look at the scale, right? If the number goes down, that's how you measure success. If you're training for a marathon, right, how many miles you can run, how quickly you get tired. Again, I'm using a lot of just physical activities like working out, how much you could bench press. I work with a lot of, again, young men who are very into bodybuilding and things like that. So those are often very motivating and very reinforcing because you see some of the success very quickly over time. Like you feel stronger, you feel more fit, your pants feel fit better. But having a way of measuring progress is key, is critical. So we have a few ingredients here. So we have in source 6, again, that which gets measured gets managed. Ingredients that increase likelihood of success, again, based on research and evidence. We have having a clear, measurable, realistic goal, right? It has to be realistic, so it can't be too difficult and it can't be too easy. We like to have like a 50% battle, which means that if you try, you will succeed. If you apply yourself, you could be successful. And if you don't try, you probably won't. So imagine you're playing ping pong against like your baby nephew, right? A 4-year-old, 5-year-old kid. Like that's not a challenge. Like that's not even fun. That's a joke, right? If you're playing against a world-class ping pong champion, that's also not a challenge. That's impossible, right? A good goal is realistic in that you have to try. In Tuchal Se'es, to give a Torah reference, right, from the story of Yaakov finding the angel of Esav, right? A measurable, realistic goal. And it has to be measurable. That's also very important. People say, I want to be happy. I want to be happier. I don't know what that means, right? You want to wake up happy every day. You want to, be good at your job. But I don't know what being happy means. That's not a measurable goal. People say they want to feel better, or I could say, I want to be less depressed. I want to be less anxious. I want to have more control over my anxiety. I want to have more control over my anger. I want to have less angry outbursts. I want to sleep better. I want to learn more Torah. Right? These are all measurable goals. These are realistic goals. For most people, and that is already statistically a higher chance of success. Just having a goal, just saying it, just posting it, already more likely to be successful. Monitoring, recording progress. I often like to ask my clients from week to week, like what's getting better, what's getting worse. That you kind of check in about your symptoms. Are you feeling more anxious? Are you feeling less anxious? Some therapists use even objective measures of collecting data, a form or something like that. It's good to have some data to look at. Social accountability. Right. This is actually for all the runners and cyclists. Again, I guess I'm a wannabe, but I know I keep using that reference. But what's Strava? The Strava app? Maybe anyone use that? Ever see your friends post? Okay, how many miles I ran? Like for everyone else looking at it, it's like, oh, okay, like 11 miles, 13 miles, right? Like it all sounds great to me, but you seem very excited about it. So, but it actually does work. It helps, right? Studies show that sharing your progress, posting selfies or whatever it is, and maybe getting that positive feedback, that reinforcement, those likes, those comments, very motivating, very good for success. Having someone to check in on you, hey, how's your week going? Are you still staying strong? Are you still kind of fighting? Are you still, winning the battle? And finally, repeating it, almost every day through repetition, through building habits. That's what makes it stick. I remember being in graduate school, and at this point, I want to pause to also. I always give a shout out. I have to make a mention of who this book is written in memory of. I was in graduate school, and there's only one other Orthodox male. We were only 4 or 5 men in the entire class. My friend Shua Polanski, blessed memory, he was a Chabad guy, Lubavitcher, with 2 young kids, very fit, healthy guy. People might know him. His wife, Simi Polanski from the Frock, is a Instagram influencer, I guess. He got very sick in school right before he was supposed to graduate, and he fought hard for his life, but unfortunately he passed away tragically after 3 weeks of battling in the hospital with myocarditis. It was at that moment that I realized how fragile life is and how we can't take anything for granted. And he was a very fit, healthy person, a young father from guy, and to see him just kind of wither and get so sick and pass away at such a young age was very, shocking, eye-opening to me. At which point I said, I have to kind of share what you know, and I'll just tell everyone here, if you have a message to share, get it out there, write it, post it, speak about it, any thoughts, any chidushim in Torah, share it with the world, because you don't know, you can't take it for granted that you'll get a chance in the future. Anyway, so anytime I give a talk, it's the Uli Nishmas Yeshua Fal Ben Herschel Leib. So we were in school, and our professor was telling us about daily meditation and how it's such a healthy thing to wake up and to meditate, and daily practice of meditation is so healthy. And I remember one girl in our class, she raised her hand. She said, "Okay, that's nice, but you can't do it every day. Like no one meditates every day. Like." And then people were chiming in, yeah, like no one does anything every day. Like that's crazy. Like yeah, you do it once, twice, 3 times a week. And my friend Shmuel, he was a proud Chabadnik, and I was very kind of quiet and private with my Judaism. He was very loud and proud. So he goes, I do something every day. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, I pray every day. And they said, well, you never miss a day when you're sick, when you're traveling on vacation, a holiday? Nope. Every day. I always pray every day. And they said, well, it takes probably 2 minutes. I'm like, no, it takes 30, 40 minutes. And they were shocked. They were blown away. And I was like, I also pray every day. But so to do something every single day is an incredibly difficult task. We don't appreciate, as Jews, how much wisdom there is in the Torah and how setting up ourselves for success and living a good, healthy life is embedded into the Torah and the mitzvot. So the idea of doing something every single day is such a healthy habit for growth. And I would say even davening with a minyan, especially for men who are not as social creatures. For some people, I go through some days, the only people I talk to are my clients and my family, right? But when you go to shul, then all of a sudden you have a built-in social structure. I had a friend, a good friend of mine, Jordan Belsky, went to high school with us. He came in from town. He lives in LA, and he's trying to be a famous actor. He told me it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. And I say, you've been there over 10 years, but okay. Great guy. He came into New York. He stayed at my house on a Saturday night. Sunday morning, I said, Jordan, I got to go to shul. Like, you're welcome to come with me, or if you want to stay home, no pressure. He said, no, I'll come with you. I don't care. So we went to the White Shul, right, a minion factory. This is before they had the real minion factory in the 510s, if you know Shalom. So we went to, I think it was a 9:30 minion on a Sunday morning. And my friend Jordan came with me, and he's like a philosopher, a deep thinker, and he just sat there, observing, watching, looking around. And on the way out, I said, what, Jordan? What is it? What do you want to say? He goes, this place is incredible. He goes, there's so many people coming in and out, all these men of all different ages, and they're all schmoozing with each other on a Sunday morning. I live out in LA, I don't see this many people in a day. And I never thought about it. He was right. I said, we have a built-in structure for socialization in the beginning of your day. It's so important, so healthy to not be isolated, to not be alone. And we take it for granted. Oh, you go to shul, you daven chakras, but it's actually life-saving. And for people in a shul, and I work for a shul, to call someone up and say, I haven't seen you in a while, why don't you come out, why don't you come daven, it could get them out of their house. And from shul, the whole world opens up. I tell everyone who moves to our community, they want to meet people, they want to get to know the community. I said, come to shul on Shabbos, come to the Kiddush, that's where everything happens. Right? I have a friend who works in Wall Street on finance. He's a junior associate, whatever, they have all these different titles. I think he might be, I thought vice president was a very impressive title. It turns out everyone's a vice president, but I was like, wow, vice president. I thought it was like the vice president of the country, like you're second in command. He's like, no, there's like 50 vice presidents. So he works in finance. He's trying to climb the ladder, and he's not so observant to daven, 3 times a day every day. But when he's in the city, he goes to mincha. He says, a mincha minyan in my building, and I go. Where else you get to rub shoulders with the CEOs of all these companies? He goes, you go to mincha minyan 2:15, and usually you get a meeting with this guy. You have to call his secretary weeks in advance. They won't give you the time of day. But at mincha, he's saying Kaddish for his father. And you say, Yishal Moshe ben Leah, who you saying Kaddish for? Oh, my father. Oh, wow. Tell me about him. Man, now come in for a job interview tomorrow morning, right? So again, maybe it's not the most lishma reason to go to davening, but that is the power of davening. That's the power of Judaism. That's the power of doing something every day with social accountability. I gave you on the back page now, as you flip to page 2, a screenshot, just the top half. My wife says I have to go easy on the research. I'm a big nerd. I have a doctorate, so I read thousands of journal articles. So here we have from October 28th, 2015. Let's make sure my phone call is not distracting. Okay. Frequently monitoring progress toward goals increases chance of success. This is published in the American Psychological Association journal. Publicly reporting or recording progress has an even greater effect, study says. And you can read the rest of the study. That's just the title. So I saw this. I said, oh, this is Sfiras Omer. This is exactly what we're doing, right? We're monitoring progress. Every day we get up and we say, this is, and I'm not being able to the mitzvah now, this is the 17th day of being clean, right? Since I started my journey. It's 2 weeks and 3 days. You counted, you say it publicly, you say it out loud. I'm a big fan of checklists. You have your, I like the OU, the magazine, the Jewish Action, the back page. Anyone else rip that out? Right? They have a great chart, by the way, my favorite Sfiras Omer chart. You have a checklist, right? And you're counting, and my kids come home, they have they still do the bubbles, you color in the bubbles going up the mountain, right? That is a beautiful thing. That is an incredible technique. And it's shown in scientific research that if you monitor progress, you publicly report it, you record it in some way, you're more likely to improve. And that is Sfiras Omer. Now we're going to put it all together and apply it practically to our daily lives. And yes, hopefully we have time for questions. So think like a casino. This is another one of my favorite ideas. when I was in graduate school, especially, I don't know why. I guess I developed some like maybe unhealthy coping mechanisms. But me together with my good friend Shua and a third guy of our wolf pack, we worked very hard. It's a very grueling, program. We got into this habit of just going down to Atlantic City just once in a while, once a semester, just for a good, guys night out to chill. We would drive through the night, play, nothing crazy, not big money, and then just go home the next day just to hang out and chill together. So my friend said, the house always wins, right? You don't make money. I said, no, I never lose money in a casino, right? I always win. And he goes, well, you got lucky a few times, but the house always wins. And I said, well, how does that work? Right? How could that be? Like, I know what I'm doing. He goes, no, every game is slightly in favor of the house, right? About 51 to 49. So based on the different rules of the game, we'll get into it with blackjack, with push goes, et cetera. But basically, for every dollar being played, the house gets, let's just say, 51 cents, and the player gets 49 cents on average, right? So what happens is when you compound that over time, times how many hundreds of thousands of dollars being played every single day by hundreds of thousands of players for weeks and months and years on end, that's how you build Las Vegas, right? That's how you build all these casinos, right? Because they know that they're just winning. They're just winning a few cents every dollar, and that's enough for them. So when I go and I don't know, just put a chip in the slot machine just for kicks and giggles, see what happens, and you win a big jackpot, they don't care. The casinos don't care. They're like, go buy yourself something nice, go shopping, whatever you want. They know that the more people that play, and the same thing for online gambling, by the way, the more money they're going to make because the odds are stacked in their favor, but small odds. So I tell my clients, think like a casino, play the long game, right? So many people want immediate change, and they also look at their life in black and white. So one of the first questions I ask in a session is, how's your week, right? Just a quick kind of check-in update, because sometimes there's like some major life events that interfere with progress. And oftentimes, especially someone with a very negative mindset, with people with anxiety and depression often have what's called a negative cognitive bias, basically a glass half empty type of mindset of always looking at the bad, always looking at the negative, and overly focusing on things that go wrong, on bad things that might happen in the future. So a negative bias. Right, so a young man says, I had a terrible week, it was awful. I said, oh, what happened? He said, I was playing basketball with some friends, I'm like, I'm making up a story, like, I missed a shot, everyone got mad at me, it was really embarrassing, we lost the game. I said, okay, I'm sorry to hear that. How was the rest of the week? Oh, it was fine, it was good. So I said, you had a terrible week, or you had a terrible day, or maybe just a terrible hour? Right? You said you had a terrible week, but you mentioned one bad thing that happened in the week, and you said the whole week is bad. And we have to think more quantitatively. I've just said that day was bad, that moment was bad, but there are 168 hours in a week, and the overwhelming majority of them were okay. They were fine. Like, you gotta tell me some good news too. Come on, I'm trying to help you out. I want to make sure you're getting better. Like, if you were able to keep it together for most of the week, that's actually progress. That's success, right? Incremental success. We gotta pay attention to that. They said, I never thought about it that way. A lot of people are into, streaks. When we talk about Sirsa Omer, and I know there's a lot of anxiety about Sirsa Omer, but if you miss a night, I know there's a lot of Jewish mitzvahs kind of breed anxiety, right? Or at least they contribute to anxiety. There's a whole, we give another shiur one time about like OCD and halacha. It's very, I have the title, The Thin Line Between Piety and Pathology, right? So there's a lot of things that people with anxiety get immersed in an unhealthy way when it comes to Judaism. So one of them is Sfiras Omer. People are very anxious about Sfiras Omer, about counting, about not counting the wrong night, not saying, last night we had meatballs for dinner, right? Not missing it. And also for people who study halacha, there's a big misconception that if you miss a night, I'm out. Right? It's over. Like, I'm done. And so many people stop counting. I even know this. Like, some people, I missed day 3. If it's right? So I stopped counting. Right? That is. Right, because of one opinion of the Bahag that maybe the whole thing is one long bracha, so just to be sure, don't make a bracha, but still count. Of course, all the other opinions say that it's a mitzvah to count every single night, regardless of whether you missed or not, and even with a bracha. So the idea of breaking a streak, and I have clients that say we have OCD, and one of my clients, and I guess trigger warning, was engaging in self-harm. He was cutting himself, and he told me, I'm self-harm free for he had the exact day, which is 49 days. And then I had a bad night, a relapse. I was feeling very lonely and very abandoned and forgotten. And, I did it again. So now it's over. I ruined it. Back at square one. I said, no, you're not. What are you talking about? Like you were good for 49 days. So you messed up one day, that's fine. But like overall, you're trending upwards, right? You're getting better. You used to do this way more often, and now it's happening, way less frequently. That's actually over the course of the long haul. If you think like a casino, in 1 year from now, in 3 years from now, in 10 years from now, you're going to be doing much, much better. You got to keep your eye on the prize and stay future oriented. So I have in my notes here, you don't have it on your page, but I jotted just 3 words for myself to mention: frequency, intensity, and duration, right? One way of measuring symptoms, and you'll notice this is more of a cognitive behavioral therapy orientation, I should say. There are other forms of therapy that are like psychodynamic or psychoanalytic, which are more kind of free form or more of the old-fashioned, sit on a couch, tell me about your childhood memories type of therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is more evidence-based, and it's more symptom-focused, which is why it sometimes gets knocked for not being deep enough. But it involves a lot of data, a lot of kind of concrete progress and change, which is why insurance companies only cover that therapy, not anything else, because there's more evidence to support it. But frequency, intensity, and duration, meaning when I measure symptoms, you can measure progress in lots of different ways. Frequency is how often it happens. So someone has a panic attack, right? So they might have panic attacks very, very frequently, but they go down over time. They become less and less frequent. That's success. That's progress. Intensity is how bad it is on a scale from 1 to 10. Maybe your panic attack is a 10 out of 10, and you have to go to a cardiologist because you think you're having a heart attack, but really it's an anxiety attack. And then after therapy, your panic attacks are still happening, but there are 6, a 7, an 8, maybe a 9 once in a while, but they're not a 10. Right? You're not going to the hospital. You don't think you're dying. You don't have to leave work. You could just go to the bathroom, splash some cold water in your face, do some deep breathing, and go back. That's a lower intensity. That's success. And finally, duration of how long it lasts. Whenever I give this idea over, some women in the crowd often say, "Oh, that's just like counting your contractions." Right? I haven't done this in a while, but I remember my wife with her app. Those apps are like, how often they're happening, how bad they are, how long they last. Right? Oh, we got to go to the hospital. That's the same idea here. Right? When we measure symptoms or when we measure success, we can look at these 3 things. And if you have those marginal gains, if you're thinking like a casino, and you're saying, "Wow, I'm feeling better most days. I'm still having some bad days, but 4 out of 7 days a week are good days," then we're trending upwards. Okay, so now let's put this all together with the 2003 British cycling team in source number 8. And this is from Atomic Habits from the first chapter. Anyone read the book? Right? Okay, we got some self-help gurus in the back. Right, so you might recognize this. This is from the first chapter. I do recommend this book to a lot of people in my shul and a lot of my clients. And they'll often tell me that it's very repetitive, or like the main ideas are really in the first chapter. I'm like, yeah, I know that too. I really just like the first chapter. So this is from the first chapter of the book. So basically, what happened is that the British cycling team was historically bad, and it was a really big blemish or stain for the country. The British typically pride themselves as being athletic or a world power, and they were only one gold medal, no Tour de France winners in 100 years. They had no sponsors for their bikes, right? It was a laughingstock. They hired this guy, Dave Brailsford, as a performance director in 2003. Okay, when he took over the team, he implemented a whole system of changes. And this is the only people who know the story are cyclist enthusiasts and like people into self-help, because it's like a very classic kind of like rabbi type of idea. So what happened is, in just a few years, by 2008 in the Olympics in Beijing, they won 60% of the gold medals. Right, 4 years later, they broke 9 Olympic records, 7 world records. In 2012, they won the Tour de France, and then the next year, winning 5 out of 6 years and 6 out of 10. Right, so he is attributed as being like this guru who was able to completely change the program and be an icon or a role model for success and culture change. So what did he do? So you might think, and this is where it gets to the difference between what's out there on pop psychology. So a lot of people are getting mental health tips, myself included, from social media, from Instagram. I'll often get, accounts or like posts sent to me, even from my clients, like, "Oh, look at this, right? What do you think about that?" A lot of parenting stuff, gentle parenting. And I'll say, first of all, know your sources. A lot of stuff is fine, is okay. A lot of it is just mumbo jumbo. They're just making stuff up. It sounds very good. They might be a pretty person telling you what they think, and they might say it works for them. Or my experience, again, not to bash anyone, but I've met some of these people in real life, and I don't know, they seem like they don't have it all together, or their kids are kind of have all kinds of problems. But to know where it's coming from, and things on social media sound good, they sound inspiring. It's all Pesach stuff. It's all Haggadah stuff, right? Just just put your mind to it, right? Just commit to something. Just want it really badly, right? Just try really hard. If you really want something, you'll be successful. Right, a lot of young men I talk to, they want to be in real estate, right? They want to be successful, they want to be gvirim, right? And they just think if I just want it badly enough, if I just kind of will myself, then it's got to happen. And that is fool's gold. It's not how it works, right? It's the boring, tough, dirty, the stuff that nobody sees, the day in, day out, behind closed doors. That's what's really going to work. And this is what Dave Brailsford did, right? He implemented the 1% rule. He said if we could get 1% better in lots of small little areas, the compound interest will be so great. And he looked all over the place, and it became contagious. Everyone started doing this for little ways to get ahead, little advantages, right? They made more comfortable seats, right? They put alcohol in the tires to get better grip. They had heated shorts to help with circulation. They had custom pillows and mattresses for sleeping on the buses when they were traveling, right? He painted the trucks white, because when you paint the trucks white, you can see the dust more, and they're able to see dust, little specks of dust that, again, on the bikes for people who are cycling in 100-mile races against world competitors, every little different advantage adds up, and it matters. So the less dust on the bikes, the faster that they go. And he kept doing this for so many things. 1% improvements in all these different areas added up to tremendous success. That's what he did. So that is, I think, the secret to success. And that's what I think Sfiras Omer is all about, right? We're building up towards Shavuos. We have the goal. We identify the goal. We start monitoring progress. And then we start looking for success and improvement in very little ways, right? The 1% rule. Think like a casino, right? How could I control myself just a little bit now? How can I push off this anxious thought just 1 minute, just 5 minutes? How can I, get out of bed and just change out of pajamas and just go outside and walk my dog? Right? You think that that's not going to do anything. I'm still depressed. I still don't have a job. I still am not married. That's going to, you know what happens? Because that gets you from a level 1 out of 10 on depression, right? Like the lowest of the low. And maybe you're at a 2 now. Maybe you go outside for a walk, you get some fresh air, and you bump into someone, or you pick up the newspaper, or you go to get a coffee, and now you're at a 2, and now you're at a 3. And then new doors and windows keep opening up. And then maybe you buy a slice of pizza, and you start to feel a little bit better. That's what's going to last. That's what's going to change. Right? It doesn't sound so glamorous, doesn't sound so exciting, but it's what really works. So I would challenge all of you, and sometimes when I do this, I wanted to go easy on the paper and the printing for Gary. Sometimes I print a worksheet, and I'll tell you what's on the worksheet. I ask people to identify their goals. You could finish a sentence of, I want to be better at blank. That's what I tell my clients, right? I want to be better. Sometimes they can't verbalize their goals. What do you want to be better at? So sometimes they'll say something silly or just not therapy related. I'll say, okay, fine, that's a good one. I like it. I can't help you with that, but keep it for yourself. Tell me something about your mental health, about your well-being, about your life. I want to be a nicer person. One thing that Shua did at the Shiva, the worst thing that happened to me at the Shiva was not that my best friend died. It was that I realized I wasn't his best friend because everyone thought he was his best friend. He was such a nice, outgoing, friendly person that everyone who came to the Shiva and spoke to his wife was like, Shua was my best friend. I was like, and everyone's like, no, he was my best friend. So it turns out we were sharing stories about when was the last time we spoke to him. So I said I spoke to him Monday at 11:58 a.m. A few days before he got sick. It was right after Sukkot, read Simchas Torah. He said, hey buddy, how's it going? How's your Simchas Torah? And I said, oh, it was crazy. It was nuts. How was yours? It was fun. It was nice, whatever. And that was the last thing that we texted each other, right? People often think about the last thing. I don't know, something psychological about it, why was his last words, something like that. Someone else sitting there said, that's so funny. The last time he texted me was Thursday at 2:48 p.m. I said, oh, it's funny. He actually texted me every Monday at the same time. And she said, oh, he texted me every Thursday at the same time. And then we realized he had a routine. Before he went into supervision for his postdoctoral fellowship, he was sitting outside his supervisor's office. And instead of scrolling on his phone, mindlessly going on social media, he texted me every Monday at 11:58 a.m. Hey, how's it going? He texted this girl, another classmate of ours, every Thursday before one of his sessions. How are you? And we realized he had a list. It sounds like weird. It sounds robotic. The rabbi of our shul and together Rabbi Willie does this also. Every single day, and I don't know if every rabbi does this. He goes through the shul directory, he texts everyone whose birthday it is, happy birthday. Everyone's anniversary, happy anniversary. Everyone's yortzeit, Shalom should have aliyah. And then they go through periodically a bunch of people, 5, 10 people they haven't seen in a while, they haven't spoken to, or maybe someone in their family is sick, or maybe someone's going through a hard time. How are you? Checking in on you. How's everything? Do you want to talk? Right? Like clockwork, like a job. Small little things, but you know what? That's how you have good social relationships. That's how you connect with people, right? Don't wait for the party. Don't wait for the invite. Don't wait for, the big vacation. Do the little things day in and day out. Count it. Even it sounds really nerdy, right? Keep a spreadsheet, right? Keep a spreadsheet. The last time you spoke to people, I know I'm very into spreadsheets. I have spreadsheets for lots of different things. I don't have one for all my friends who I spoke to, although I think about it sometimes. I have for all my clients, and I have lots of rosters in my life, working for a shul and working for the community, and just being involved in things. I've worked in different schools. Like, you have different rosters of people that you know. Think about them every day. Think about who was a cousin I haven't spoken to in a while. When's the last time I spoke to this friend, and just build those habits. So, in conclusion, I want to wish everyone a yontif for Shavuos of B'nai Chorin. Right? We should be free. If you're going to break free from Pesach to Shavuos, and you want to be free from your bad habits and to live your best life, Sfiras HaOmer is the model. Pick something, monitor it, share it with your friends, do it every day. Think long term. Even if you break a streak, I know Sfiras HaOmer is supposed to be a streak. Even if you miss a day, keep going. If you want to learn, I think I promised you a shout out, right? It could be weekly, right? Have a schedule, have a routine, have a habit. Wednesday night in the Anshei Shalom Beit Midrash, right? Come to the Beit Midrash program. Daf Yomi, right? Do the Yomi things. Have a checklist, and you will see over time, in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, you will grow to heights you've never believed were possible. I'll open up now to questions, answers, comments, and just anything you want to say, anything you want me to go back to. I hope you found this helpful and meaningful. Okay. Yeah, Gary. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, sure.
How do you go about getting somebody who has low self-esteem to build it up? Because especially somebody who just feels they can't do what they can't do.
Right.
Okay.
A great question. So, whatever it is that you are working on, it's the same model. And I'll often get calls from parents about their kids. And I'll give you some piece of advice also. If you're calling a psychologist or a therapist, it is, I know it could be a frustrating experience. I try to get good at getting back to people. Most therapists don't answer the phone, so leave a message. There is an art to leaving a good message versus a not such a good message, right? Keep to the clinical language as much as you can. Just like who, what, when, person I'm calling about my 9-year-old son. He has anxiety, depression, whatever it is, and I want to schedule an appointment. That's a good message. Don't say like a lot of other random, unimportant information. It's not conducive for a good phone call. But to answer your question, I get a lot of calls about self-esteem. I mean, usually parents will call me and say, my son, he just has low self-esteem. I just want him to be confident. Just want him to really be, comfortable in his own skin. Very common referral. Not technically a disorder or like a clinical problem, but like I'll treat them anyway and try to help them. And I believe it's really the same thing. It's like the little things. There probably are some deeper rooted issues that could be worked on, but self-esteem is built over time through many successes. Right, so if they, I always like to know my client's strengths. That's the first thing. So don't tell me your problems. I don't want to know your problems yet. We're going to spend a lot of time on your problems. Tell me what you're good at. People are usually thrown off. Like, do you have any skills, talents, hobbies? What do you like to do for fun? What do you like? Who are you? And those things is where you could build a self-esteem. They could be, a really good artist or a really good musician, or just a kind, sensitive, caring person, and focusing on those things and having some victories. I think it really, help improve their self-esteem over time. Yeah, good question. I saw a hand up.
It was an interesting comment you made about going to shul and how that's like a really healthy habit, which I never thought about before.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking back to, especially a previous job I had where I'd be working a lot, but shul was like the one, like a core, and no matter how much work I had, that didn't get in the way of it. Without that, I would have just been working all day. And it's like, it really is a healthy habit. I never thought about that. It was a very interesting point.
Yeah, we have to. I have a chapter on that in my book too about how the Gemara in Brachos says that if you go to shul, you live a long life, and how I think that's connected to socialization. That there's a famous Harvard study, this long-term study, where they discovered that the most important factor for a happy and a healthy life, controlling for everything, for lifestyle and eating and exercise, is the amount of meaningful social relationships. That people, especially elderly people who are alone, who are isolated, are prone to all kinds of health problems. And one way that Judaism fosters, community and socialization is through the shul. I'm a big fan of shul, and I think even if we don't daven, we have a lot of JFKs in our shul. We call just for Kiddush, and we're fine. We have a great Kiddush in Atlantic Beach. It's a great Kiddush, and we're fine. That's why we do it. Come to shul just for Kiddush. It's totally okay with us. I mean, we hope we could engage you in another way, but showing up and being social and also having a daily commitment is incredibly healthy for your mental health. Chesky.
Well, maybe you could speak to the idea of like publicly reporting your gains
Yeah.
versus health on social media with waiting for that next hit of like, okay, do they like my post or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's a very good question. With the dopamine, it becomes an addiction. It becomes kind of like a unhealthy thing of like when you keep posting. I know there's times when I post things, you're constantly checking who liked it, who saw my story, how many comments I get. Oh, this one didn't get bad. For teenagers, by the way, it's like the kiss of death. A lot of girls will say if they post something and they don't get like really an obscene amount of likes, like 15, 30 likes within the first few minutes, like.
It's been a tailspin.
Right, they delete it. They're done. Like it's like it never existed.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely unhealthy. So it doesn't have to be social media. Sometimes people have an accountability buddy, like someone to check in on them. A chavrusa is just someone who's going to be there, just going to show up and say, hey, speaking to former chavrusas, right? That definitely helps. Just posting, having it on the fridge, having it on your wall, or having someone in your family who knows what you're working on, that's enough for social accountability. So it doesn't have to be social media per se. Yeah.
So if somebody wants to improve in an area, but it involves another individual or another person, like if you say, I want to be a better parent or I want to be a better spouse. So you may, conceive what you think is success, and then you try to implement this. I'm going to spend 15 minutes a day doing X, Y, or Z, and then it's not well received. So how does the person kind of figure out a way to achieve a goal when it involves another person? And how do you,
Yeah,
work
that's
on that?
that's a great question. And usually the more people involved in a problem, the more complicated and complex it is. So dealing with schools, teachers, coworkers, things like that. I always tell my clients, I can only help the person sitting on the couch. I can only help you. I can't change or fix anyone else. So I usually like to start with Beino lebein atzmo issues, right, before we get to Bein Adam lechavero. But you're right, and I would say you can't control that. You can only control yourself. But you want to define. Like you kind of answered the question for me. By Francis is really okay. You look familiar. Okay. So I like to define what does it mean to be a good parent or to be a good husband, wife, or whatever, and you operationally define it in behaviors, right? So you don't just say I want to be a better husband, or like my wife will often tell me like I need you to help me more before Shabbos, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what do you want me to do? She's like, literally anything, right? Like, take care of the kids, set the day, like anything, like just help me. So you have to operationally define what does that mean to be a good parent or a good husband. It could be spending more quality time with it. I would be confident if you really take that seriously as your goal and you track it and you monitor it. I get my 15 minutes in with all my kids every single day. At first, you might be met with some resistance, and sometimes when you change the dynamics in the family, like people are a little suspicious and they kind of push back. But over time, I think you will see a lot of gains, a lot of progress. Yeah, good question. Yes, over here.
How do you get a young adult that you're close with, to be less anxious?
Okay, so that's basically just. So you're saying, what could you do as like a non-therapist, as a friend or family member, to help someone be less anxious? So that's I would say that's a big responsibility. It's not. I can tell you what you shouldn't do, what definitely doesn't help, and what you could do wrong, and just there's a little bit of what you could do to make it better. But I wouldn't say that you could again, I would say you could cure it. A little bit, right? So fine. The first thing, and again, there's a separate presentation I have entirely, but basically very quickly, just accepting, validating them, being able to say, like I don't judge you for it. You could be frustrated, you could even be like annoyed. and you can say, look, I know you're an anxious person and you're very nervous, very worried about this thing, and I get it, but like, it's making me stressed out or something like that. I mean, you kind of just name it. You could validate it. I definitely wouldn't say things like you're being crazy or you're overreacting, right? That doesn't work. Or stop being so dramatic. That's also a big no-no, right? Just kind of saying, like, what can I do to help you? Do you need anything from me? How can I support you? Just very positive, very supportive statements, I think, are the best. Usually people know already that they're crazy. They already know kind of that they have a problem. They don't need someone to tell them, or they don't need someone to make them feel worse about it. So just kind of being like, hey, I know you're having a hard day, you're going through a hard time, you're very stressed out. Like, you're not really thinking, so clear right now, you're very emotional. Like, let's, calm down, or, how can I help you? Something like that. That's really, kind of, and then maybe you want to talk to someone and, can we get you some professional help? Yeah. Okay, good question. All right, I want to keep them. Happy to stick around afterwards because it's late night. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Eric, again. And this is really, really Yashar Koach, everyone. I hope.
I wasn't sure if we'd have a minyan, but I think we're good. So.